People often think power comes with loud voices, gold cards, or tailored suits, but sometimes power walks in wearing sneakers, a hoodie, and silence. He didn't argue. He didn't snap. He didn't beg. He just sat in the seat he paid for, opened his laptop, and got to work. And for that, they asked him to move. Not because it was the wrong seat, not because the ticket was wrong, just because he didn't look like someone who usually sits there. If you've ever been overlooked, pushed aside, or quietly dismissed, not because you were wrong, but because you didn't fit the image, this is your story. Tap subscribe if you believe this silence can be a statement, and quiet resolve can shake an entire system. Because this isn't just about a flight, it's about a man, and a moment, where everyone expected him to quietly give in. But this time, he didn't. When Miles King stepped into the first-class cabin of Airlux Airlines, there were no applause. Just the soft sound of his suitcase wheels rolling over plush gray carpet, quiet enough to go unnoticed. No one noticed him, except Nora Dale, the lead flight attendant. The gray hoodie he wore, a subtle violation of an unspoken dress code, caught a few side glances. Not the blatant kind, the trained kind. A glance, a polite smile, a minor adjustment of a tie. Miles didn't flinch. He was used to it, used to the feeling of entering rooms where people assumed he didn't belong. He checked his ticket, seat 2A, window side, booked 2 weeks ago specifically for the legroom. He didn't sleep on planes. He worked. From this seat, he could open his laptop, stretch his legs, and polish the keynote speech he was set to deliver the next morning at the Global Tech Ethics Summit. Miles sat down and opened his laptop, and just as he plugged in his headphones, a voice soft as velvet but sharp as glass pierced the air. "Excuse me, sir, may I see your boarding pass?" Nora Dale, hair pinned up, soft red lipstick, tall frame, uniform crisp with a gold-banded belt, stood like someone trained to protect brand image first, comfort second. Miles removed his earbuds, slowly, his gaze polite, but practiced the kind that says, "I know this script. I've played this role before." He handed her his card, calmly. "Miles King, Platinum Tier, Seat 2A. Nora looked at it, double-checked. It matched. Yet her expression mirrored someone inspecting a passport from a country she didn't recognize. "I see. It's just that this seat is usually preferred by one of our regular Platinum flyers, Ms. Lena White." The words were wrapped in customer service, but the underlying tone was assignment. Nora continued. "She usually takes 2A on this route. She's quite particular." Miles didn't frown, didn't flinch. He simply looked out the window, where morning light streamed down the tarmac like a sheet of clarity. "I'm also quite particular," he said quietly. "That's why I chose this seat." The reply made Nora blink. Her head nodded, but her shoulders didn't relax. And then Lena White arrived from the rear of the cabin, entering like it was her runway. Straight blonde hair, beige silk dress, pearl-colored snakeskin purse. She looked at Miles not as someone occupying a seat, but as an object out of place. "I always sit there," she said to Nora, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "It's basically mine." Not a request, a declaration. Nora turned back, leaned in toward Miles. "Sir, would you mind relocating to 4D? It's also a first-class seat, and we'll offer you complimentary champagne." Miles didn't flinch, didn't look up, didn't look at Lena. He just gently closed his laptop, eyes still forward. "I paid for 2A. I intend to stay in 2A." A silence sank over the cabin. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy, electrified kind. Like the air before a thunderstorm, when the world forgets how to breathe. From 2B, a young Asian passenger slowly lifted their phone, camera activated. And in its first frame, a black man sitting straight, not yelling, not budging, just holding his place because it was his. Nora Dale stepped back half an inch. She was still smiling, but the smile of someone who had faced thousands of difficult passengers, and yet, this one unraveled faster than she expected. Lena White stood just behind her, tapping the face of her Apple Watch, a gesture that said, My time is more valuable than your hesitation. I have a meeting as soon as I land, Lena said. Clearly, I've never had to ask twice for my seat. It wasn't a complaint. It was a coded indictment. A type of declaration people like her learned early that the world shifts more easily when they speak with practiced entitlement. Miles didn't turn. He'd heard variations of that tone his entire life. From the day people asked his mother, "Is he adopted?" to the store clerks who shadowed him in high school, to the tech conferences where people patted his shoulder and said, "You with IT support," never guessing he was the event's lead sponsor. Lena's "my seat" didn't surprise him. It simply reminded him privilege begins where explanations end. Nora leaned closer, voice hushed. "Mr. King, I truly understand, but Ms. White flies with us weekly. She's very generous with the crew. She prefers 2A. You'd really be helping us if you agreed to move." It sounded like pleading, but beneath it was institutional pressure, carefully scripted. Miles turned to look at her, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. Not in anger, but with a deep, historical fatigue. Does she own the seat? Or is this about who looks like they should be sitting here? A few passengers stopped breathing. A man in 1D lowered his head, pretending to adjust his seatbelt. Nora didn't respond right away. Her eyes flicked. Her lips parted. But before she could speak, Lena made a move. She stepped forward, placing her bag into the overhead bin. And at that exact moment, something small slipped into Nora's hand, quick, practiced, like they'd done this before. Miles didn't have to look to know what it was. He had seen that move too many times in boardrooms, restaurants, hotels where transactions happened through glances, not contracts. Where favors wore perfume and expectations came folded. Nora froze for a second. Fingers twitched. Eyes scanned. She straightened. "Sir, final confirmation, would you be willing to move?" No more smile. No more coaxing. This was now policy enforcement. Miles exhaled through his nose. He had once believed success would insulate him from this. That if he built enough, earned enough, dressed well enough, he'd stop being questioned for simply showing up. He had been wrong. He looked at Nora, and his voice, low and deliberate, sliced the air. "I'm staying in this seat because I belong here." The silence in the cabin was no longer absence. It was a fog invisible, but saturating. Miles stayed seated, back straight, hands on thighs, still, present. Nora Dale whispered into her shoulder mic. No words could be heard. But the passengers had heard enough. A woman in 2C lowered her head and pressed record. A man in 1F shook his head slowly. "This ain't gonna end well." Then came the supervisor. Tom Reed, clean-shaven, crisp shirt, a frame that screamed order. He didn't look around. His focus was Miles, like he had been briefed. "Sir," Tom said, towering over 2A, "I'm the lead cabin supervisor. We've had a request to resolve this seating matter." Resolve. Polite on the surface, loaded underneath. Miles didn't flinch. He didn't need to, because now everyone was watching. Tom leaned closer, voice dropping. "Let's not make a scene, sir. I can offer you 1D. It's actually closer to the front." The offer was wrapped in comfort, but its core was clear: get out. Miles held Tom's gaze. And from a voice that had carried weight long before it held wealth, came, "Let me be very clear, this is my seat. I booked it, I paid for it, and I'm not moving." No one laughed, no one blinked. A soft ding signaled the first video upload had gone live. Tom tilted his head. He had faced resistance before, but not this kind. "Sir, perhaps you're unaware of how we operate in this cabin," Tom said, tone sharpening. "We prioritize legacy clients, those who contribute consistently. This isn't personal, it's procedural." Procedural, a word cold as corporate steel. The kind of word used to justify anything while claiming it's not about race. Miles tilted his head, as if studying a flawed painting in a gallery. "So what you're telling me is that despite my boarding pass, my tier, and my reservation, the problem is that I don't look like your usual legacy clients." A breath caught somewhere in the cabin. A black woman in 3B leaned forward. The young man in 2B switched from stealth mode to full record. Tom hesitated. He knew he was on display, but he also knew in this role there was no backing down. Sir, if you continue to refuse, I will have to escalate this further. Escalate. Another word. This one didn't chill. It threatened. Miles turned to the window. The plane hadn't moved. Sky clear. A single cloud stretched across the gate like a pale scar across the blue. Then escalate, he said. Voice flat. I'll be right here. 5 minutes passed. No movement, no chatter. Even the ice in the champagne glasses had stopped clinking. Miles stayed seated, calm, centered, unbothered. But the cabin wasn't. It was shifting. The tension had changed shape. What started as awkwardness had hardened into a quiet form of dread. Passengers weren't just observing anymore. They were choosing sides silently, with phones, with posture, with breath. And then the cockpit door opened. Captain Ray stepped out, tall, seasoned, crisp uniform. He had the posture of someone whose word had never been questioned. He was followed closely by Tom Reed and Nora Dale, both suddenly looking smaller in the presence of real authority. Passengers straightened in their seats. Some stared. Some looked away. Even Lena White, previously confident, now shifted back like she'd lit a match and wasn't sure how big the fire would get. Captain Ray stopped at 2A, expression unreadable. Sir, he said, professional and firm. I understand there's a seating issue. Our crew has the right to reassign seats as needed for the comfort of all passengers. His tone was neutral, but the message wasn't an offer. It was a closing door. Miles looked up at him, steady. Captain, with respect, he said evenly, I have a confirmed seat, platinum status, and a purpose for choosing 2A. There's no rule that allows this seat to be taken from me just because someone else prefers it. Captain Ray's jaw tightened slightly, but he didn't speak. He didn't have to. Procedure was already doing the talking for him. Tom Reed stepped forward again, emboldened by the captain's silence. This time, he didn't ask. He instructed, Sir, we're going to need you to move to 4D now. His voice had shed the courtesy. It was command wrapped in professionalism, with just enough detachment to make it sound procedural. Miles didn't move. He didn't raise his voice either. Is there a reason I'm being asked to leave the seat I paid for, one that applies to every passenger or just to me? The question hung in the air like fog. No one answered. In row 2B, a passenger tilted his phone slightly, capturing the moment in full. Row 3B was recording too. A quiet lens war zone had opened around them. Tom leaned in closer, his voice dropping. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Your choice. That sentence had traveled across generations. Miles had heard it before, just in different uniforms. School principal, mall security, police stop. It always meant the same thing: surrender now, or be made an example. He looked at Tom, then at the captain. Let me ask again, Miles said softly. Are you removing me because I refuse to give up my seat for her? He nodded, gently, toward Lena, who now looked everywhere but at him. Captain Ray finally spoke. You're being removed for causing a disturbance. There it was. A neat, paper-thin lie, said just loud enough to be policy, and just quiet enough to be shame. Miles didn't flinch. He sat still, his hands calmly resting on his thighs, his breathing steady, the kind of calm that doesn't ask for permission. Then, with deliberate motion, he reached inside his blazer. Not rushed, not theatrical. He pulled out his phone. With one swipe, the camera opened, and with one tap, it started recording. Just to be clear, he said aloud, his voice level. I'm being threatened with removal because I won't give up my assigned seat to accommodate another passenger's preference. A ripple ran through the cabin. No yelling, no fight, just a phone and the truth. Tom reached toward him, hand hovering near the device. Sir, recording is not permitted on board. Actually, Miles interrupted, without raising his voice. There's no federal law against recording on an aircraft unless it interferes with crew duties. I'm simply documenting this moment for my protection. Tom froze. Captain Ray stiffened. Even Nora looked down. A silence followed, the kind that didn't come from peace but from exposure. "In 2C, a woman whispered to her seatmate. "He didn't do anything wrong." From 3A came another voice. "I'm recording this too." Lena shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her privilege wasn't supposed to be public. Miles placed the phone gently on his lap, camera still rolling. He didn't have to say another word, because the entire plane was already listening. The cabin doors reopened. 2 uniformed security officers boarded, not rushed, but with the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. They moved down the aisle, led by Tom's pointed gesture. "That's him," he said. "No title, no Mr. King, just a finger." Miles didn't move. He simply adjusted his phone, tilting it up slightly so the lens could see them coming. One of the officers stepped forward, expression guarded. "Sir, we've been asked to escort you off the aircraft. Please gather your belongings." Miles looked up, meeting his eyes. "Am I being removed for violating airline policy?" A pause. The officer glanced at his partner, then at Captain Ray, who now stood a few feet back, arms folded, eyes narrowed. "You're being removed for creating a disturbance," the officer replied, carefully avoiding the question. "By sitting in my assigned seat?" Miles asked, his voice still calm. No answer. Around them, passengers sat frozen, as if watching a scene too uncomfortable to exist in real time. In 2B, the young man tilted his phone higher. In 3C, a woman pressed record with trembling fingers. The officer shifted. "Sir, please comply." Miles slowly closed his laptop, placed it into his bag. He stood, not rushed, not humiliated, just present. As he stepped into the aisle, another passenger whispered. He didn't raise his voice once. Another voice added, "But they sure did." Miles walked forward, head high. Behind him, the cabin wasn't quieter, it was heavier. Because silence, when wrapped around injustice, doesn't fade, it lingers. Miles stepped off the plane with the same calm he boarded with. No one shoved him, no one cuffed him, but the damage was already done and the witnesses were no longer silent. Behind him, the security officers lingered awkwardly. One tapped on a tablet, reviewing the incident log. His brow furrowed. "It says he was disruptive," the officer muttered to his partner, "but none of the witnesses are saying that." A few feet away, Miles opened his phone again. He hit record. "Documenting for legal clarity," he said softly into the mic. "Removed from a flight while seated in my assigned seat, with valid credentials. No violation cited." He didn't need to dramatize. The facts were enough. Then a soft voice behind him. "Excuse me, sir." He turned. A young woman stood there, bag over her shoulder, phone still in hand. "I was seated near you. I saw everything. I recorded the whole thing. From the moment the flight attendant approached you." She held out her phone. The video was clear, full audio. And more importantly, a shot of Lena discreetly slipping money into Tom's hand. Miles blinked just once. "Would you be willing to share that?" he asked. She nodded without hesitation. "It's yours. I'll testify if needed." He smiled, not wide, not victorious, just grateful. Because stories like his often ended in silence. This one wouldn't. Back inside the aircraft, Lena White had taken her seat. Miles's seat. She sipped champagne with tight satisfaction, unaware that her role in the story was already escaping her control. In the galley, Tom and Nora whispered. Tom discreetly unfolded the bills Lena had slipped him. $200. He slipped it into his wallet like it was routine. "Some passengers just understand the value of service," he muttered. Neither of them noticed the blinking red light on a phone lens across the aisle still recording. Then, a tone echoed through the aircraft. A voice over the intercom summoned the flight crew to an urgent onboard meeting. Tom's smirk faded. Nora's eyes twitched. Outside the cabin, a storm was gathering. In a high-rise office overlooking the skyline, Richard Grant, CEO of Airlux Airlines, received a call from the head of public relations. "Sir, we have a situation. A video from this morning's flight is going viral. Handle it, he replied without looking up. Passengers get kicked off flights all the time. This one's different, the PR head said. It shows our staff accepting cash to remove a black passenger from a seat he paid for. Grant finally looked up. Who is the passenger? A pause. His name is Miles King. Silence. The CEO stared forward. His lips parted but said nothing. Because that name meant something. Miles King wasn't just a passenger. He was the CEO of CoreMind Technologies, the very company Airlux had been courting for months for a $50 million modernization deal. And he wasn't just a tech leader. He also held 23% of their stock. The emergency board meeting was called within the hour. Some executives arrived in golf polos, others in half-zipped suitcases. All of them looked like they'd been caught off guard because they had... The mood in the room was brittle. No one spoke above a whisper. No one made eye contact for long. The screen at the front of the room was already paused on a still image Miles King, sitting in seat 2A, calm and silent, surrounded by staff. When the door opened, every head turned. Miles entered. No blazer, no entourage, just the same hoodie, the same presence. Behind him followed Lisa Chang, his COO, and 2 members of CoreMind's legal team. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. His presence alone made the boardroom straighten its spine. Richard Grant, CEO of Airlux, cleared his throat as he stood. Mr. King, thank you for coming. We'd like to offer our deepest apologies for what happened on Flight 227. It was unacceptable and does not reflect the values of our company. Miles sat down slowly, folding his hands in front of him. I'm not here for apologies, he said calmly. I'm here for accountability. No one moved. The screen came to life. The video began to play again, this time on a 72-inch screen, in high definition. The tone in Tom's voice. Nora's hesitation. The moment Lena handed over the folded bill. The expression on Miles's face as he was escorted away. When it ended, the room stayed silent. And then, Miles spoke again. Let's talk about next steps. No one at the table breathed too deeply. Miles didn't posture. He didn't gloat. He just spoke like a man used to being underestimated until it became someone else's problem. As of this morning, he said evenly, CoreMind owns 23% of Airlux stock. When combined with our institutional allies, that becomes a controlling stake. A ripple moved through the room, not loud, just sharp. Richard Grant swallowed hard. The CFO leaned forward, eyes narrowing toward his tablet. Miles continued, eyes steady. We were in talks to finalize a $50 million contract to overhaul your customer systems. Remember? Of course, Grant replied quickly. That project is suspended, Miles interrupted, effective immediately. The air shifted again. One board member whispered something to another. Someone else silently reached for a glass of water and missed. This isn't a negotiation, Miles added. It's a response to a culture problem that clearly starts at the top. Lisa Chang, seated beside him, opened her laptop and tapped a key. A second screen lit up behind them displaying early analytics. Video views 2.4. Trending hashtag #ShareSeat2A. Public sentiment 87% negative toward Airlux. Projected stock drop 18% by market close. Miles let the silence linger. Let them sit in it. I'm calling a shareholder vote in 48 hours, he said, and I have 2 non-negotiable demands. One board member finally asked, voice trembling. What are they? First, everyone involved fired. Second, we pause all expansion plans until you fix your house. He leaned back. Or we pull the contract and the capital. No yelling, just gravity. And suddenly, they understood they hadn't removed a man from a seat. They had provoked the one person who could bring the entire plane down. Downstairs in a windowless HR conference room, 3 employees waited in silence. Tom Reed, Nora Dale, Captain Ray. No one had told them why they were summoned, but the hallway stares, the urgent whispers they already knew. At exactly 4:30 p.m., the door opened. An HR director entered with 2 security officers flanking her. No small talk, no delay. She placed 3 folders on the table. "Effective immediately," she said. "Your employment with Airlux is terminated." Tom's mouth dropped open. "We followed protocol," he snapped. "That man was being difficult." The HR director opened her laptop. One click. The video began playing again. Tom's tone, Nora's hesitation, Lena's money, the smirk, the lie, the silence. "Was accepting a cash bribe from a passenger part of that protocol?" the director asked coldly. Nora's hand shot to her mouth. She began to cry. "I knew it was wrong," she whispered, "but I froze." Captain Ray didn't speak. He simply closed his eyes. And in that moment, the man who had flown through storms realized this was the one he wouldn't land. "You failed," the director said flatly. "Not just the company, but the idea that every passenger deserves basic dignity." Tom stood, face red, fists clenched, but he didn't argue again. Security didn't touch them. They didn't need to. The walk to the exit was punishment enough. Outside, cameras waited. Inside, the boardroom above approved every demand Miles had listed unanimously. And for the first time that day, he stood. "We're not done," he said. "This was just the audit. Now comes the rebuild." A week later, the headlines had begun to fade. But inside Airlux's headquarters, the real work was just beginning. The mood had shifted from scandal to silence. Not fear, exactly. Something closer to uncertainty in the presence of someone they could no longer underestimate. Miles King sat in a different kind of seat now. The front row of an all-staff town hall, flanked by his core mine team. Hundreds of employees filled the auditorium. No one clapped, no one whispered. When Richard Grant, the Airlux CEO, took the stage, his posture was humble, almost unfamiliar. "Today, we begin what will be the largest transformation in our company's history," he said. "Not for PR, not for damage control, but because we failed and we need to earn back trust." He paused, then turned slightly, gesturing to Miles. None of this would be happening without Mr. King's decision to stay in the conversation, when he had every right to walk away. Miles didn't blink. When he took the stage, he didn't raise his voice. "Let me be clear," he said. "This isn't about punishing people. It's about fixing a system where punishment was often applied to the wrong people." He looked out at the room, not a sea of faces, but individual lives. "This could have happened to anyone who looked like me but didn't have what I have." He let that sit, then added, quieter. "And it still does, every day." Somewhere in the back, a flight attendant exhaled audibly. Not regret, not relief. Recognition. Because change wasn't just possible now. It was mandatory. Miles stood beneath the soft white lights of the auditorium stage, holding the room without raising his voice. Most companies handle incidents like mine with 2 things: press statements and quiet firings. But neither of those change culture. They just hide it better. He clicked a remote. A new slide appeared on the screen behind him. The CLEAR program, Comprehensive Learning for Equity, Awareness, and Responsibility, powered by Core Mind. Gasps rippled across the room. This wasn't a policy tweak, it was a blueprint. Starting next week, every Airlux employee from flight crew to executive board will enter a 40-hour immersive training. Miles announced, "This isn't sensitivity training, this is systems training." He paused. Because bias doesn't just live in people, it lives in procedures. In who gets the benefit of the doubt, and who gets removed from seat 2A. At the back of the room, someone lowered their head. Lisa Chang stepped forward next, adding specifics. The CLEAR program will include real-time simulations, AI behavior mapping, and personal accountability logs. And it will be public-facing. No secrets, no spin. One executive whispered to another, "This is going to cost us millions." Miles heard it, and answered without turning. "Not changing would cost you more." The room went still again. Not because people were afraid, but because for the first time they realized the system wasn't just being criticized. It was being rewritten. and they would all be holding the pen. The first clear training session began in a repurposed conference room. Gone were the corporate posters. In their place, mirrors, literal ones floor to ceiling. Each participant was handed a tablet, a headset, and a question. When was the last time you made someone feel like they didn't belong and didn't notice? For Nora Dale, it was day one. She sat in silence, headset on, watching a simulation unfold, a digital reconstruction of her own voice asking someone to move. A passenger who looked like Miles, but also like dozens of others she'd once gently redirected. It wasn't cruel, but now, hearing it played back, it didn't sound neutral either. It sounded practiced. We're sorry, but this seat is usually reserved. Over and over. A trainer's voice interrupted through the headset. Bias isn't always loud. Sometimes it smiles. Sometimes it sounds like protocol. At the end of the simulation, the tablet asked for a journal entry. Nora didn't know what to type. In another room, a group watched body cam footage from past boarding situations, some resolved fairly, others clearly not. One young pilot removed his headset midway. This is intense. So was the fallout, the facilitator replied, and you weren't the one removed from the plane. Silence. The clear program wasn't designed for comfort. It was designed for truth. And for many, especially those who thought they were one of the good ones, this was the first time they realized. They'd never been asked to confront the harm they caused when they thought they were just doing their job. It was raining soft, persistent. Miles King arrived alone. No security, no press, no suit, just a gray hoodie and a familiar carry-on. He wasn't there to speak. He was there to fly. The check-in agent recognized him instantly. Her hands fumbled slightly over the keyboard. Mr. King, welcome back to Airlux. He nodded. No smile, no resentment, just grace. At security, the officer barely looked up until another agent leaned over to whisper something. Then came the double take, and a softer tone. Have a good flight, sir. But Miles didn't need anyone to shift their posture. He noticed what they wouldn't say, how they held their breath around him. Not out of guilt, out of fear of being next to a reminder. Because his story had changed the company, but it hadn't erased the discomfort that came with seeing him in the terminal, in the lounge, at the gate. He boarded early, seat 2A. When the flight attendant greeted him, she hesitated only a second. Welcome aboard, Mr. King. He nodded again. As he sat, he unzipped his laptop and opened a blank document. The title notes on staying. Not winning, not walking away, not punishing. Staying. Because real change doesn't just happen when you disrupt the system. It happens when you remain visible inside it long enough to outlast the discomfort. And that seat 2A was no longer just a seat. It was a symbol of what happens when a black man chooses not to leave quietly. 3 floors below the Airlux executive suite, a private meeting was underway. Miles sat at the head of a smaller table this time. No board, no spotlight, just his core mind team, and 3 new names on the agenda. Tom Reed, Nora Dale, Captain Ray. The room was quiet when they entered. They looked older, though it had only been weeks. Nora's eyes darted downward. Tom's jaw tightened. Captain Ray stood, back straight, like he still believed he was in uniform. No one had told them why they'd been invited. Miles spoke first. This isn't a performance review, he said, and it's not a trap. They looked at him, unsure whether to relax or brace for the blow. I believe in accountability, he continued, but I also believe in something harder. He paused.
Re-entry.
Tom blinked. Re-entry. You were fired because of what you did, Miles said. But what if we measured people not just by the harm, but by what they do after? He tapped the table. Lisa slid over 3 folders. It's called the Second Seat Project, Miles said. 6 months of training, restoration, and work. Not back in first class, but back in motion. They opened the folders. Inside structure, conditions, expectations. Nothing soft. We don't erase consequences, Miles added. We build bridges beyond them. Nora whispered. Why would you offer this? Miles didn't smile. Because someone once gave me a second chance when the world called me a lost cause. And because this seat, he pointed to the chair he was sitting in, was never just for me. The room stayed silent long after the folders were opened. Tom stared at the page terms, timelines, behavioral audits. It wasn't charity, it was work. Harder work than he expected. Nora's hands trembled. She wasn't reading, she was remembering. Her voice when she told Miles to move. The envelope. The look in his eyes. I don't know if I deserve this, she said quietly. Miles looked at her, steady. That's not for me to decide. But doing the work, that part's on you. Across the table, Captain Ray hadn't touched his folder. His face remained unreadable until it cracked. Just slightly. I made a call that day, he said, because I trusted my crew. He looked down. Not the passenger, not the evidence, the people who looked like me. There it was. Not an excuse. Not even an apology. Just truth, bitter and plain. You can't undo it, Miles said, but you can choose what you do next. Tom closed his folder. I want in, he said. It wasn't defiant. It was raw, like he hadn't realized how much he needed the invitation. Nora nodded slowly. Tears welled but didn't fall. Me too. Captain Ray sat back. He exhaled through his nose, then finally opened his folder. I'll do the work, he said, and I'll teach others how not to make the same mistake. For the first time that day, Miles smiled. Not wide, just enough. Because the power wasn't in offering the second chance. It was in watching someone choose to take it. Change didn't arrive with a parade. It showed up in subtler ways. Like the gate agent, who now looked people in the eye no matter the color of their skin or the brand of their luggage. Or the flight attendant who no longer said, we have to seat you elsewhere, but instead asked, would you be willing to help me solve this? In cities across the country, the CLEAR program spread. Other airlines called. Government transportation panels took meetings. Universities added the Seat 2A case study to ethics curriculums. And at baggage claim, a young man in a hoodie waited quietly. A woman walked past him, then circled back. You're him, right? She asked. Miles turned. I've been trying to say thank you in my head for 2 weeks, she added, because I was on that flight. And I didn't speak up. Miles didn't make her feel worse. He just nodded. You're speaking now. That was the thing about justice. It didn't demand applause. It asked for continuation. In Memphis, a veteran pilot told his crew he wanted to relearn how to listen. In Chicago, a customer service rep rewrote her morning greeting, no more robotic script, just human questions. How are you doing today? Really? At Airlux headquarters, a small plaque was quietly placed above Seat 2A on one aircraft. No branding, no logo, just 5 engraved words. Everyone deserves to sit here. And slowly, something shifted. Not in policy, but in posture. People began to look longer, listen harder, and remember a man was removed for being seen. Now he was being remembered for what he made others see in themselves. Tom Reed now reported to a regional baggage center. He wore a reflective vest instead of a pressed shirt. No aisle authority, no first-class announcements, just conveyor belts and the silence between them. But in that silence, something had changed. He listened more. When a trainee asked a question, Tom didn't bark the answer. He paused, checked his tone, asked if they felt heard. It wasn't penance. It was rewiring. Nora Dale took a job as a gate coordinator at a small commuter airport. Lower pay, no tips, no priority passengers. But every boarding pass she scanned became a ritual. Names mattered now. Pronunciations mattered. Welcome aboard, Mr. Okoye. Thank you for flying with us. Not because someone told her to say it, but because, for years, she hadn't. After work, she journaled through each shift, what she noticed, what she assumed. Her entries weren't pretty, but they were honest. Captain Ray didn't fly again. The airline wouldn't clear him. But the second seat project offered him a role he never imagined. Instructor? He now led de-escalation workshops for new pilots. The first slide of his training deck: "You don't always have the full picture. Act like it." He told them about the day he failed to ask questions, about the weight of policy when it's used as a weapon, and how silence isn't always neutrality. Sometimes it's surrender. The three of them had not returned to where they were. But they were moving one seat, one conversation, one reckoning at a time. Miles sat alone in the quiet lounge of a private terminal. No cameras, no team, just him, and silence thick enough to echo. The company had changed. The staff had been held accountable. The story had gone viral. Viral again. And then it had faded. But not in him. Because the seat had never just been about legroom. It was about seeing how quickly dignity becomes negotiable when you're not wearing the right uniform or the right skin. Lisa called. He didn't answer. He opened his notebook instead, the one where he tracked ideas, not profits. On one page he wrote, "Justice isn't just restoration, it's recognition." He paused. Then, beneath it, "So why do I still feel unseen?" Miles had stayed visible. He'd sat through meetings, led reform, spoken at universities. But sometimes, when the applause faded, he wondered. Had he become a face people admired, but still didn't understand? The praise was safe, palatable. People loved the idea of a black man who didn't yell, didn't sue, didn't burn the building down. But did they love the discomfort he brought with him? Or had they just gotten used to it? He stared out the window. Planes rose and disappeared into gray clouds. Maybe justice wasn't a finish line. Maybe it was a constant recalibration of what you accept, what you challenge, and how long you're willing to sit in the tension before someone else learns how to carry it. He closed the notebook, and for the first time in days, he exhaled. Gate B12, Flight 227, same airline, same route. But everything was different. When Miles approached the boarding area, he didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The gate agent looked up, paused, then stood. "Welcome back, Mr. King. You're already checked in." No questions, no glances at the name twice, no doubt hidden behind protocol. She scanned his pass, then lowered her voice. "Thank you for all of it." He nodded, accepting the words without absorbing their weight. Some gratitude still carried the scent of guilt. But today, he chose to let that go. As he walked down the jet bridge, something caught his eye, a plaque, small and subtle, mounted beside the entry door. It read, "This seat was once questioned. Now it is protected." He didn't smile, but something in his shoulders softened. Inside, the crew greeted him without hesitation. "Mr. King, you're in 2A, the lead flight attendant said. "Let us know if you need anything. Truly." No one asked to see his card. No one checked the manifest twice. He took his seat. Same view, same legroom. But it no longer felt like a space he had to defend. Instead, it felt like something rarer. An invitation. Because change didn't just live in policies. It lived in tone, in memory, in the way eyes met yours without flickering away. Seat 2A had once been a battleground. Now it was a benchmark. Not for comfort, but for proof that justice, when insisted upon long enough, eventually learns how to greet you by name. In a middle school classroom in Newark, a teacher dimmed the lights. On the projector, a still frame, a black man in seat 2A, calm, unmoving, outnumbered. The students leaned forward. "This is from a real event," the teacher said, "and we're not here to debate it. We're here to feel it." She pressed play. The room filled with silence, not because the video had no sound, but because everyone was listening. A boy in the front row raised his hand slowly. "Why didn't he just move?" he asked, not with judgment, with confusion. The teacher paused the video. "Why do you think he stayed?" No one answered at first. Then a girl in the back whispered, Because if he moved, we'd never know it happened. Brr. At an Airlux hiring orientation, a trainer held up a lanyard. The badge read, Second Seat Project. Graduate. Everyone you'll meet here is trained to treat each passenger like they belong, she said, because someone once had to prove it the hard way. New hires nodded. Some knew the story. Some had lived versions of it. In Houston, a woman boarded a flight and hesitated. Her seat 2A. A flight attendant noticed and smiled. You okay, ma'am? The woman exhaled. Just thinking about that man. The one who sat here. Stayed here. The attendant nodded. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. And as the plane took off, the world below shrank. But the story carried altitude. Not as legend, but as a reminder. Justice doesn't end in the seat where it began. It begins in the people who carry it forward. Back home, the rain had returned. Miles sat by the window, hood up, fingers still. The world outside dim and honest. His notebook lay open, the same one he'd carried through boardrooms, airports, and silence. Most pages were full now, observations, policies, reactions, strategy. But this one was blank. Until now. He picked up his pen. There's no final version of justice. He paused, watched the ink settle. Only the version we are brave enough to insist on today and kind enough to revise tomorrow. He closed the book gently. Not with finality, but with clarity. Because the story of Seat 2A wasn't really about him anymore. It belonged to the teacher in Newark, to the second-chance pilot in training, to the little girl on her first flight who looked around and saw that everyone got water, and everyone got eye contact, and everyone got to sit without explaining why. Miles stood. No fanfare, no farewell. He stepped outside into the rain, letting it soak into the fabric of his hoodie, into the folds of everything that had been said and unsaid. And as the wind picked up, a single line echoed back through memory. Sir, we're going to need you to move. He smiled. Because he had moved, not out of his seat, but through every space that once said he didn't belong, until even the silence had no choice but to make room. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.